Coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
This is how you get at the children. Like legalizing pedophilia would be like that's going to be a massive fight. And even like efforts to kind of normalize the desire as what those just flail. But if you get in and convince a bunch of pubescent 12-year-olds to start taking hormones or to insist that they're the other, then you're really gonna that's actually revolutionary. That truly will destroy the society.
It's so much.
It was a smart move.
Right. Totally. It's in some ways it's actually much sicker and more evil than mere predation. Not that wouldn't be twisted enough.
No, it's true. It's true because you make them complicit in their own victimization.
Right. Hello, and welcome once again to the Roundtable, your weekly publishers and editors podcast here at the American Mind. I'm your host, Spencer Clavin, features editor of the American Mind and associate editor of the Claremont Review of Books. And Seth Barron and I are holding down the fort once again. Managing editor Seth Barron is here with me, and we're going to take it on. Just the two of us, the buddy cop movie everybody's been waiting for. Seth, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Spencer, and I'm glad that you're here backing me up, or I'm backing you up.
It's great.
Side by side, or however it works.
Back to shoulder, back to back. I was going to ask you if you were Starsky or Hutch. I think you're welcome to. You just take your pick, and I'll be the other guy.
I guess I would be Starsky, but whichever, I don't remember, I don't really remember which was which, but I'm glad to play either role.
Great. I was relying on you to remember which one was which, so maybe we'll just be ourselves.
I think the David Soul character was Hutch.
Was he?
And the David Soul and the like Starsky, I think, was like the Jewish one, like whatever his name was, Glazer. So, but I guess we're both. Like I don't know. Ethnically, it's kind of we don't really fit. So
it's true. We're both.
We might
Semitic.
have to pick a different duo.
Yeah, two Semitic goofballs with wry sense of humor. It's not exactly the polarity one seeks.
No. Maybe not.
Oh well, but people tell me that they like these when we just do the two of us. Probably because we spend the whole time talking about forgotten franchises from our respective youths. But let's not just do that for the whole hour. Let's also talk about some news items. Last time we were going to talk about Pride, but we sort of didn't get to it. So let's start with that. We've touched now several times on this kind of, is conservative boycotting working or isn't it working? And I think we first started kind of feeling a little bit hopeful with the whole Bud Light Dylan Mulvaney thing. They sent Dylan Mulvaney these cans of Bud Light. He became the spokeswoman for this beer brand that ostensibly is supposed to cater to masculine middle America. And that's been now kind of a piece with a bunch of little skirmishes that have happened this Pride Month. I don't think anybody was surprised that this June has been a particularly kind of heinous and extravagant display of the sort of newly baptized trans extremist lobby, the T leading the LGBs by the nose into kind of a bright new future of twerking in front of children. This stuff is all very grotesque, as all of our listeners, I'm sure, will agree, but there have also been some real kind of responses from the right. One was at Target. We did touch on that briefly. The kind of genital tucking swimsuit sparked a counter protest and led Target to take some stuff down. Starbucks has also, halfway through Pride, kind of issued a directive to take down rainbow decorations and things of that nature, prompting cries of genocide from the expected corners, but also seeming to go just fine in the Starbucks that I have since visited. My order is a nitro cold brew in case we ever go out for coffee. And then the last one is this Dodgers counter protest, which is pretty remarkable. I think our own Peachy Keenan was sort of involved. There were, I can't remember now if we've touched on this one at all, but the Dodgers announced that they were going to honor the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, which is a drag group, guys that dress up as nuns and I guess raise money for medical causes, founded during the AIDS crisis, now being like awarded a community hero award. The Dodgers backed down on this, then they sort of doubled down, reverse course again. But the latest is that this massive kind of peaceful, completely peaceful, so far as I can see, massive march on Dodger Stadium on the day seems to have been pretty successful, well attended. The actual award was given hours before the game to a pretty empty stadium, lots of booze. Seth, how's your Pride Month been? I guess is the question I want to ask.
Well,
and what's go on.
I think there's some interesting stuff going on.
Yeah.
I think it goes beyond the conservative boycott stuff. I think generally it feels like Pride maybe has maybe jumped the shark, as people like to say. I feel like 2023 will be known as the year when Pride kind of fizzled, and maybe it's going down the other slope. I don't know. I mean, also we had the things with the Armenians in California, and then Muslims up in Michigan, like I guess Hamtramck. It's the only city where the city council is entirely Muslim, and they voted to disallow putting pride flags up on city property.
Yep.
But generally speaking, it just seems like another thing is I wonder if Juneteenth, our new federal holiday, kind of comes in the middle there and sort of disrupts all the pride celebrations a little. I mean, it sort of distracts from it. Like June, I guess June is supposed to be this month of just like orgiastic pride.
Yeah. It is kind of the Easter season of the secular liturgical calendar, or not so secular. Like,
and then what? Juneteenth comes in, and I mean, ideally, I think like the Human Rights Council or whatever that group is called would like to see Juneteenth as kind of like part of Pride, but I'm not sure that's going to translate. It's interesting regarding the T leading the LGB by the nose.
Yeah.
It's kind of like T was original. I mean, we've talked about this before, that T is at cross purposes with LGB, right? Because you have two axes. You have gender identity and sexual orientation. And according to the advocates, these two things are completely separate. Like you can be a trans woman and like women, and that makes you a lesbian or, whatever. But so initially, the T were allowed under the umbrella because they were too weak not to let them in.
Yeah.
But now you can't get them out from under the umbrella because they're too strong.
Interesting.
Like T actually is like the has all the political weight somehow. Yeah. Like how did this happen? Who knows?
Well, I mean, two, I think, plausible reasons. One, in the kind of inverted logic of maximal victimhood, they're always going to be more bizarre. There's going to be fewer real trans people. Not to say that people won't have these kind of, onsets of gender dysphoria or whatever, but there's going to be fewer real trans people. So they're going to be like a more of a minority. But also, they're a totalizing philosophy. Like they're a kind of theological, as your friend Exulancic is often pointing out, they're a kind of theology that doesn't leave any breathing room for other visions of the world or whatever. So yeah, it was like they kind of became this little subsidiary addition to the quote unquote movement. And then now they run everything. I mean, Steve Saylor's point was like, well, now they're going to have to become front and center because every other part of this coalition has gotten everything it wanted, right? That was sort of his prediction after Obergefell, was that this was the only, if you've developed this professional activist class whose power and influence depends upon not simply achieving good victories or just victories, but achieving victories, making changes, this kind of like endless revolution, then they're going to have to turn, Saylor said back in the day, to the trans thing, which, yeah, I mean, look, the other argument, which is very prevalent and has like gained more traction, I think, because of all the evidence that it plays in its favor, is the slippery slope thing, right? Is like, look, we told you this was going to happen. If you open the door a mere crack to any of this stuff, you're eventually going to get to like pedophilia and whatever. But I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it's not quite plausible to me. One of which is the kind of philosophical disjunct that you're indicating, that it doesn't actually seem like a natural next step, but also because it actually hasn't gone in the direction that those predictions went. Like the trans thing was kind of an imposition on that trajectory, which was supposed to be gay marriage, the back in the day when the slippery slope was a big topic of the argument. It's supposed to be gay marriage and then polygamy and then pedophilia, essentially.
Right.
And instead this like kind of left field abolished gender millenarianism has intervened for all of these kind of interesting reasons.
Well, I think it's kind of smart from looking at it from the perspective of the nation destroyers, like whoever it is who's designing this and putting together this plot, moving towards polygamy. Like, I suppose if you were to do that, make polyamorous relationships be legal, it would be complicated and unpleasant and stupid. But
I mean, there's plenty of people advocating for it on the extreme left. It just hasn't gotten the traction that trans has.
Sure. It would just be a bunch of nerds kind of involved in like domestic legal disputes ultimately. But trans is brilliant because what this is how you get at the children. Like legalizing pedophilia would be like that's going to be a massive fight. And even like efforts to kind of normalize the desire as what those just flail. But if you get in and convince a bunch of pubescent 12-year-olds to start taking hormones or to insist that they're the other, I mean, then you're really gonna that's actually revolutionary. That truly will destroy the society.
I mean, it's so much.
It was a smart move.
Right. Totally. I mean, it's in some ways, it's actually much sicker and more evil than mere predation. Not that wouldn't be twisted enough.
No, it's true. It's true because you make them complicit in their own victimization.
Right.
You force them to do this. It's like entering into a cult.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just rape people, well, then you've created
you are the bad guy. You are definitively
you're the
bad guy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is kind of a circuitous route to psychosexual deformation, which is obviously a major ingredient in like country destruction, as you mentioned. Yeah. There's another kind of. So I wanted to go back to something you said about like, is this the last Pride? Like, will we look back on this as kind of the moment they stepped over too far? I mean, there's definitely some indications. Like, there was a poll out recently that support or belief that same-sex relations are moral is like down pretty significantly among Republicans, less than a slim majority, like 46% or something now. And I have to imagine that like this is part of what happens when you package all of the other stuff with like, let's perform irreversible like flesh hacking surgeries upon children that they can never go back on. Anyway, like, corporate pride was always kind of an embarrassing spectacle, even for gay radicals. Like, it was obviously, transparently hypocritical and like cringe and sort of just lame in the extreme. And then it's like if that's your if what you basically are is a corporation like Target that is just trying to win the most possible dollars and the most possible elite favor at the same time. And the only way to win elite favor is to just engage in these carnivalesque extremities of depravity and kind of degraded mutilation. Then it's like, yeah, who's gonna? That's just not a winning sell,
Right.
And like, there's the right has gotten a lot more activist. So yeah, I certainly would think that there's already some backlash, as they say,
Yeah.
but it'll definitely continue. And the question is like, what shape will it take? Like, will it take the just kind of whatever control Z on all of this, like, or will it be, you know, directed at the kind of transhumanist stuff? Certainly seems like that's the most pressing item on the agenda.
You know,
Yeah.
I was reminded of something the other day. This somebody sent me something, and I was thinking about drag queens and the whole, oh, drag queens are so wholesome and it's just so wonderful. It's just an okay. I remember there was this drag queen who had this bit, and this was like maybe 15 years ago that I first encountered this guy. And I mean, he's like this obese white gay guy from the South. And
Sure.
he had this character he called Shirley Q. Liquor, who he would like do blackface and
Right.
put on a moo. And it was just this insane caricature. I mean, it was so over the top.
Right.
This like, but it was like it was just totally hilarious,
Sure.
but completely outrageous, which is what all of this was supposed to be. I think I mentioned this before, but like John Waters would say of like Divine, who wasn't really a drag queen, but he was a drag queen. He would say Divine didn't think he wasn't trying to pass as a woman. He was trying to pass as Godzilla. Like the point
Yeah.
was to come off as like it was supposed to it's like an act. It's supposed to be insane and like outrageous and like truly carnivalesque.
Yeah, and
And
countercultural, right? Like the whole point is this is this bizarre, seedy fringe of the culture.
Right.
And a lot of those like old queens, like they would never have wanted kids around at their performance. Like that would have been ruined the entire thing. Like it was an adult performance for adult sensibilities. And yeah, like it's funny because it's obviously over the top. And there is this like, from Judith Butler on, there is this idea that for anything to be accepted in civilization and society, it has to be right at the center, like all the time. You have to be looking at it and celebrating it. And like that has definitely not sold. So yeah, I don't know. I could just as soon never see another rainbow flag again. Like, what's the use of it? It's like it's all very 1980. Like it just feels like, why are you still waving this flag around? Go live your life. Like the only reason to be out there waving that flag is if you have nothing else going on, and like this is your whole, professional grievance your whole life.
It really occurred to me like occasionally people burn pride flags,
right?
Which I'm not in favor of doing. But
I kind of am, but go on. Yeah.
Okay. Then they get arrested.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and it's always charged as some kind of like hate crime.
Right.
But at the same time, you're allowed to burn American flags with impunity. Like nobody blinks.
Right.
So it's kind of like, well, which is the flag? I mean, we saw at the White House, they hung the pride flag in the center of the White House portico or whatever that structure is on the day when that trans woman took her top off and was like flaunting her breasts on the White House lawn. Now I thought that was interesting that everybody got really mad at him.
Yeah.
Even Corinne Jean-Pierre was like, well, that was really inappropriate.
Right.
But you know what? Why was it inappropriate? You're allowed, women are allowed to expose their breasts in Washington, D.C. Like, it just to explain to me why it's inappropriate.
It's inappropriate because people noticed. That's
Yeah,
fine.
well, right.
Yeah.
That's inappropriate. But as far as if this is if being trans and all of that is like the highest value, and getting body modifications is like medically indicated and should be paid for and all of that, then why on earth should it be considered like salacious at all?
Oh, totally. It's totally theological. It's our major cultural export, at least under this regime. Like the Biden administration, I think, basically does think of that flag as more representative of quote unquote our values. And I don't know, man. Like I would totally burn a pride flag at this point. I think I said that last year on some show. Like it's a hate symbol. This is Jeremy Carl, our friend and fellow traveler at Claremont, published something about this as a hate symbol. I mean, in the same way that if you were a Vietnam dissenter, you would say, as an act of kind of radical patriotism, I'm burning the American flag because of everything it's come to stand for. That, like, maybe I love this country, but like this is all it's been usurped in the name of a sort of an evil, whatever. It's like symbols take on what they come to be used for.
Yeah.
And that's like, yeah, I mean, if certainly if you can burn an American flag to protest what America has quote unquote become, you should be able to burn a rainbow flag to protest what gay liberation, so called, has mutated into. Anyway, it's very interesting. I like your kind of this the last pride prediction. I think that's a good way to summarize it for now. And I think definitely we're looking at some serious, like we're looking at some serious overstep and overreach. I hope people kind of like localize that where it belongs, which really is with like transhumanism. But we'll see. It's like when you come for people's kids, they're not exactly obligated to like parse and make fine distinctions. So they certainly they effed around and found out. That's for sure. Okay, let us discuss the fail son in chief, Hunter Biden. So this is kind of a companion piece to last week when we were talking about Trump's indictment, and we were saying, well, even if he did break the law, it's like in a domain where only and exclusively Trump would ever get anything like this kind of treatment. And as if to confirm from on high, Hunter Biden has reached a plea deal with the Justice Department regarding his tax evasion and illegal gun possession. So this is, gosh, I mean, Biden is not the president. Obviously, he never was the president. That is, Hunter Biden is not and was not ever the president.
Yeah, watch out.
But it's
watch
certainly,
out.
What's that?
I said, watch out.
Exactly. I'm manifesting, speaking it into existence. But there is now kind of a whole narrative about not only is he, should he not be charged or held accountable, but he's actually the victim here. The Washington Post, the complicated relationship between a presidential father and a struggling son. These are detailed by Eddie Scarry, and the Hunter Biden plea deal is a tragedy about a troubled life. Kidding, it's about the trashy Biden and the corrupt DOJ. That's the whole headline of a Federalist story. Hunter's life is on far more stable ground than it was 4 years ago, reads the Washington Post article. The Justice Department, writes the New York Times, was focused on a particularly chaotic and unseemly period in Hunter Biden's life when he was addicted to crack cocaine. Okay, so I mean, it's tiresome to point out hypocrisy. And it's tiresome to like wring your hands about this stuff. But this has been going on. This is an investigation that's been going on for years. It now will kind of fizzle out into this plea deal. There was supposed to be a whole investigation into the like by the actual Biden of it all, the Joe Biden of it all, and his involvement with kind of these Ukraine deals. I mean, is that just scuppered now? We're just going to sort of let that be? I suppose the Congress can still look into it, but anyway, what's going on?
I feel like that is that's the game, right? They're like, okay, yeah, Hunter Biden got involved in some bad stuff. He was naughty. He did drugs, and he forgot to pay $1 million tax bill, and he had a gun. So we're gonna slap his wrist on that stuff. Meanwhile, like what his crimes were had nothing to do. I mean, ultimately it did have to do with his drug addiction, but it wasn't caused by his drug addiction. I mean, what the real problem is that he was engaged in a massive influence peddling scheme that involved the entire Biden family, Chinese and Ukrainian companies, and massive, massive payouts that he did, essentially flying around the country on both Air Force Two and around the world, rather, on Air Force Two when his father was vice president, and Air Force One. He would go around the world with his father, clearly, like his father, giving the okay, an implicit okay to everybody, like, yeah, this is my agent.
Yeah.
And then money laundering, structuring payments. I mean, the crimes are so manifest and so many. Yeah, so this is clearly just a way to throw a sheet over the whole thing and say, "Oh, okay, it's all taken care of."
But Seth, who among us has not had a youthful dalliance with Burisma, during a particularly chaotic time?
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah, everybody, we've all had our father have Ukrainian prosecutors fired at the threat of $1 billion loan guarantee. No, I mean, it's just utterly grotesque. I don't know. And I guess this is how they cover it. They just make it all. And this is just what Biden always says, look, like, I love my son and he
Right.
struggled. And, every family has these problems, just to try to humanize it, make it like Hunter Biden is like this normal guy who, had a
Just
drinking problem.
smoking crack and dancing around in his underwear like a big, goofy, fun-loving, doofus. Right. I mean, it is. There's a certain brazenness to. I mean, the timing can't be intentional because this was a Trump-appointed attorney, David Weiss in Delaware, who it was looking into this, and you know at the same time, there's just something increasingly kind of tragicomic and poetic in this aspect of our politics. Like the corruption is so brazen, so over the top, and the cover-ups or the excuses for it are increasingly just flimsy and embarrassing.
I mean, why is this family rich?
Yeah.
What do
Why
they do?
indeed?
The Bush family at least it had inherited money, and then it was in the oil business, and had various, it was an old family, had money. Why is Joe Biden wealthy? His wife is a college teacher. He was in the Senate for 50 years and then vice president. His son, his brother, I think he has two brothers. They're all involved in his sister. They're all involved, his nieces. They're all involved in this political consulting business, which can only be selling access and influence.
Right.
So this idea, like, well, just it's not his fault if people think that his relatives have access to him. And if they sell that knowledge or that potential to people, it doesn't mean that it's real. Like, has he actually, so, did he actually influence anything? Well, yeah, obviously he did, like in Ukraine. It seems like complete. I mean, it really is like this crime family. I don't care what anybody says. That's seems like it's pretty obvious. That's what it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, it, somebody made a comparison between this and like the late Republic when foreign kings would buy off Roman senators in the event, to protect against the event in which like the Rome would go to war or threaten to go to war with these kings, then these senators could be relied upon to vote against it to keep this from going down. I mean, there is this kind of bonkers other dimension of it where maybe this is a weird way to put it, but I sort of feel like there are two Ukraines. Like in my head, there are two Ukraines, and one of them is the like plucky nation fighting for its independence against an encroaching Russia, which, I'm like kind of a squish on Ukraine. I think they're genuinely they're genuinely wronged, and it's horrible what's going on there. But like that's kind of this major governing narrative of American politics right now, having almost nothing to do with the realities on the ground except as a LARP. Like that, this is Zelensky is the world's great hero. And then there's the Ukraine that is kind of like tacitly involved in every major political presidential scandal. Like not only this, but in the whole, the Trump impeachment, where he was supposedly, trying to influence Zelensky, and that's all been kind of like swept under the rug, and this is now going to be ignored. Like, I don't really have any smoking gun or conspiracy to put forward here, except to say that there is this bizarre double life that this nation is leading in our national consciousness, and that in itself feels like there must be more to that story than.
Well, I'll tell you something. Right now, I'm in DC, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, if you walk around Bethesda Chevy Chase, it's like a very wealthy area. This is like kind of ground zero,
yeah,
of military industrial complex, or one of the suburbs. There's a lot of astoundingly beautiful houses that must go for like, I don't know, between $3 and $5 million or more. I don't know, just amazing. Like, and you see so many Ukrainian flags flying.
Oh my gosh, there's more in Alexandria. There's more Ukrainian flags than American flags.
I believe it.
Yeah,
but I've never seen. I mean, except in the East Village where there are some like there's an old Ukrainian neighborhood. I haven't seen any middle class or working class. Like, what poor person is flying a Ukrainian flag? It's my question. It's strictly like a symbol. It's like this regime symbol.
Yeah.
Like, not just like an American flag is one thing,
right?
But a Ukrainian flag is really like truly about like the projection of American power, and like it's like the ultimate form of salute and support for like the military industrial complex. It's the people who are getting rich off of it. Because like I always like to say, like, if you like the trillions of dollars that were spent on the Iraq-Afghanistan war, it's not like they actually brought the trillions of dollars over there. It all just flowed through, Northrop Grumman and Booz Allen or whatever into DC regional area real estate prices. And like,
so it's like a kind of luxury allegiance to display.
Yes, kind of.
Hey, here's another question about DC, since you're reporting from behind enemy lines. You mentioned Juneteenth earlier.
Yeah.
And out here in Nashville, like, I was really dreading Juneteenth. I wasn't exactly dreading it this year because I had basically forgotten that it was coming. But when they made it a federal holiday, I was like, oh man, now every year we're going to have yet another display of fealty to the regime that we have to suffer through, and all sorts of faux pieties and stuff. Basically nothing happened that I can see. Like, there was no celebration, or I saw a couple tweets. That was like the max of what went on. Did Juneteenth like kind of vanish into the ether over there too, or is it just because it's in a red state?
I mean, Juneteenth was made a federal holiday right after, like 3 weeks after George Floyd and his whole episode. Yes. And in the same way that George Floyd has kind of vanished from the national consciousness.
Yeah.
Like, the third anniversary of the most significant figure in 21st century American life, evidently just went completely unnoticed. I think Juneteenth, the whole African American history and struggle and all of that has also, just like Pride, been so corporatized.
Yeah.
And so, you open up Netflix or a magazine or anything, and you see all of the flat art cartoon pictures and the celebratory sort of nuance and the language of uplift. It's so anodyne and so boring that I think I think it's just faded into it's like it's just advertising. And
Yeah.
it's not clear what it's advertising for. I think it all kind of just blends into the background. I think that's what's happening because now it's like the new official civic religion.
Right.
It's the new ideology, the combined like pride and black uplift talk.
Yeah.
And so who pays attention to it? It's just
Yeah.
boring.
It's like total drainage of all color from counterculture along the
Yeah.
lines of what we were talking about. Midge Decter wrote this, I think, kind of incredible essay called The Boys on the Beach, I want to say. And it was about her experience as like a straight family vacationing on Fire Island before AIDS, I think is when they started.
Okay.
And she has this moment, like long into this essay, she describes with like a lot of kind of empathy, but also wry remove and just this whole kind of irony. She describes this, subculture that she would observe and the times when they would kind of welcome her, and then the times when she would have to when like, they would party and it wasn't like fit for families. And then, she said she describes this moment where I think it's Joe Epstein writes a piece about homosexuality that is frank and sort of introspective about his own attitudes toward it. And everybody gets up in arms, and this gay protest comes to like, decry Epstein. And she said it was like this transformation between the kind of vibrant, ironic, self-aware, tasteful gay culture of actual subculture, counterculture, and the like drab, militaristic, just kind of dull. She was like, the gays that I knew would never have been caught dead even wearing the clothes that I saw in this protest. And there is like something kind of that rings true about that and about the Juneteenth thing. It's like, yeah, it has become such a mainstay of power that it's completely like rude and corporate and bland,
And
um,
saccharine.
and saccharine. Oh my gosh, like sentimental. Yeah, absolutely. And there's like no, yeah, I mean, there's no cool to it anymore. That's for sure. I also wonder whether like the thing you were saying about forgetting Floyd, some of these episodes, I think the woke Vanguard benefits most if our memory of them is kind of hazy. Like if we really did revisit them every year and think like, gosh, we sure did have a bunch of riots and then go back into lockdown. And like, if we actually had a cultural memory about that, we would come back to them in moments of greater emotional sobriety and perhaps think like, maybe this was a bad idea. So like it's probably to the left's advantage if it gets kind of memory hold a little bit at least. Well, let us turn now to a developing story. Who knows by the time you hear this where things will be with all of this stuff. But the Titan submersible, a really like a tiny submarine, basically, whose purpose was to travel to the wreck of the Titanic, carrying five uber wealthy passengers, has been lost. It lost contact with the surface. This thing is piloted remotely, as I understand it, by these like video game controllers. I think they're PS2 controllers. It's a 22-foot long about capsule. It is estimated to have had enough breathable air in it to last until basically Thursday. So you'll hear this when we have like more knowledge about it. I mean, it doesn't look hopeful to me. My suspicion is that this thing has either been crushed by the pressure, sprung a leak, or the to me the most unthinkable nightmare scenario is it has simply drifted to the bottom of the ocean. It's 2.5 miles down to the Titanic off the coast of Canada, and just basically wheezed out its last oxygen, which is just a nightmare death. It naturally has been met online with the most ghastly possible kind of reaction, which is serves them right. They are rich and white and they spent a lot of money on this trip. I'm quoting from Twitter now. Actually, it's funny when rich people die in a homemade submarine. There's just this kind of like sub discourse of, yeah, get them, which just I think is kind of worth briefly discussing as emblematic of some sentiment that's in the air. Like So it costs what, $250,000 to go in this submarine, and I guess the idea is you're just, if you have all this money, you're not supposed to spend it on fun things that are also risky, and we should be happy when you die. Like, I get that these people took a risk and acknowledge what that risk was, and that they weren't exactly like, discovering Cuba or something. They were taking a joyride. But one of them is 19, the son of this, British businessman. And I mean, I don't know. This seems this seems kind of sinister, no, to like be just
Well,
cackling over this stuff.
yeah, no. I mean, people are, I mean, you got to figure. I mean, it's definitely it's a horrible event, and especially if you think about it in those terms, that it's just unmoored and they're just stuck on the in the wreckage of the Titanic and they're just gasping for air.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, it's like,
that's ghastly. I guess people, sure, it's like this joyride, and it does seem. I mean, I guess what I find kind of, I don't know, somewhat wry or ironic is the head of the company. I guess one of the
yeah,
heads of the company is down there, uh,
right.
but this sense that, I mean, he just keeps talking about how the government, like the Coast Guard, isn't doing enough, and why aren't they doing anything to save? But I mean, the whole point of like, you can't rescue a submarine that's 2 miles below the surface. I mean,
Oh,
there's
yeah,
there's
it's
there's nothing you can do. For the same reason that they were never able to raise the Titanic. I don't know. I put on Twitter, I was like, have they considered draining the ocean? I mean, I mean, I guess this
right. I mean, no, but like that. But see, this is a perspective that I grasp and understand. Is like we all have kind of horror and empathy fatigue, and we all make light of terrible situations. And like, yeah, this is something you take on, a risk you take on when you take a submarine. And exactly, once you're that far out, the Coast Guard is basically saying like, there's really not a lot of hope. And there's another kind of admittedly funny element to it, which is that the CEO of this company is on record saying something like it's not inspirational to hire like white guys over 50. So I want to diversify my crew. It's like, maybe you should think more about whether they can operate the PlayStation controller that they're using to
and he did have this kind of heavy duty tech bro attitude, like
right.
we're just we're just doing what we can with what we've got, and we're just garaging this, and I've got this game controller to steer it, and here's like this vent came from Camper's World, and we're doing what the government would never be able to do because they're too worried about safety. And so I think people are kind of responding to the failure of this Silicon. I mean, because the thing is, what does Silicon Valley do? Like, they just sort of come up with new widgets for your Excel spreadsheet. I mean, ultimately, a lot of what they do is like really cut for the last 20 years. I mean, okay, the iPhone, but
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
exactly are they doing that's so world beating?
I mean,
Uh,
there is this funny thing where it's like we're gonna disrupt the Xerox industry. Like we're gonna
yeah,
totally upend the like
right.
the bespoke
Workplace
water bottle.
productivity will never be the
It will
same.
never be the same, right? And like, so yeah, that part of it is always funny, and like a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. There is another dimension of it that's like, it kind of reminds me of when Elon fired off his SpaceX rocket and it failed. It was a test or whatever and failed.
Yeah,
And everybody was like, oh, like you can't even get a rocket to the moon. Like when people are genuinely doing kind of amazing stuff, something in me is just very like starved for not just subsistence, but endeavor.
sure.
And so there's something about this where it's like, if you have a lot of money, what you should do with it is kind of like pour it, like open a vein and let it pour out hourly in public as a public contrition for existing. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I get that there's like people who are just so astonishingly rich, it's hard to feel bad for them about anything. But like civilizations are kind of built on the ambitions of, great men. And you do want to encourage people to not just be like, well, I don't want to, I don't want to spend my money on something too extravagant. Like, I don't want to try too many rockets because they might explode. Like, there's something very censorious about that.
It's kind of like the argument that people always make, like, well, I don't like the Catholic Church. They have so much money. They could give all their. Why don't they give their money to the poor? That's what Jesus would do, and sell all their art and all their. Okay, let's say the Catholic Church did that, and all the poor people in the world got like 2 weeks worth of cornmeal. Well, then what? Then I mean, the thing is, this is the funny thing is, the people who make this argument tend to be like these atheist socialist types. But isn't that the exact same argument that like Luther and all of the Protestant reformers were making in like the 16th century?
It's classic, like warmed over reformed Protestantism, essentially, but
with like this supposedly humanist bent. But it's really just kind of puritanical and sniffy.
Yeah, like, it's like, Luther was against the Catholic Church. Well, I'm against church in general. Like, I hate all religion. Yeah, it's kind of one-upsmanship. And of course, so who's gonna buy the like? So the Vatican's gonna sell all of their art, and then someone somewhere is gonna buy each of those pieces.
Yeah,
and so those people like aren't good. They could just take that money and give it to charity instead. Also,
I guess they should melt down all the gold.
Oh, right, yes,
and I guess then sell it to plutocrats. I don't know.
Right. You know who agrees with that idea? Grave robbers. That's a big popular thesis on the part of like the people that robbed the pyramid.
That's a good point. But I think it's a similar type of thing. Like, why? It's kind of like Whitey on the moon, like that thing. Like, why are we spending money on things like going to the moon when there's a black child who has food insecurity?
Why indeed? Yes, we should wait until everything is perfect before we do anything that's
exactly
of any use. Well, anyway, I'm praying that they'll survive. I think I'm not hugely hopeful that they will. And mostly I just find this a kind of fascinating little cauldron of various social media vices. Yeah, there's something kind of emblematic to me about this whole thing. Like, both, like, okay, I get that there's funny aspects of it, but what I don't get is like they deserve to die. Like the ocean claims the victim. Anyway, let us now turn to encouraging people to read the damn site. Seth, every week we want to let you guys know about one of our favorite pieces from the week. AmericanMind.org is where you can find these if you somehow have managed to find your way here without knowing what this podcast is about. We actually do run a website, AmericanMind.org. And I would like to direct you to a piece called Demystifying AI. It's by Arlie Coles, who is a Twitter friend of mine. A great example of when online friends can have real interactions. And Coles works on large language models. I should say, she says in the piece, I'm a researcher in speech and language AI myself. And what I like about her piece and what I like about her sort of public facing discussion of this stuff in general is that she understands why that there is a lot of obscurantism around AI, that it's often mystifying and kind of badly explained. And especially, she has a really good grasp of how the language that people use, especially experts use about AI, is incredibly misleading. Like, say that it's hallucinating is an example she uses here. Like, that very strongly gives the impression of, well, this is a Frankenstein's monster that's coming, like, dreaming dark dreams until it comes to life. But she's also kind of appealingly down to earth about, well, like, it's not doing any of those things. Here's what it is doing. And she's capable of explaining that in a non-hyper mathematically advanced way, although she is a pretty advanced mathematician. And I guess my take on this is, like, if you're going to worry about AI, which there are reasons to worry about it, if you're going to, you should know what the thing is. rather than kind of putting all the math about it inside of a big black box and never looking at it, so that you don't even really know what exactly to be concerned or afraid about. And Arlie's piece does a really great job, I think, kind of laying out the contours of this stuff so that it can be a little bit more, so that if you're going to have apocalyptic fears, you can at least have them in an informed fashion. So it's called Demystifying AI by Arlie Coles, and you should go check it out at AmericanMind.org. Seth, what do you got?
My piece for this week is by Kenan Spivak, and it's called Scammer in Chief. And Kenan, who's a businessman, but also a lawyer, and he has an MBA, he digs deep and thoroughly into all of the various scandals surrounding Hunter and Joe Biden and James Biden. And he really, look, if you want a one-stop shop where you can read up on every nasty detail of their dealings and who got paid what, and which Chinese entity connected to the Communist Party gave money to which Biden associate and where the money was then filtered, this is the place to go. It's a great piece. It's really long, it's really detailed, and really well researched and referenced. So I would definitely recommend checking out Scammer in Chief by Kenan Spivak.
Yeah, that is a great piece. And it's always nice when somebody brings you kind of chapter and verse and puts it all in one place. Like, I almost think that's sort of a public service. In addition to being like informative and good to read, it's just the kind of one that you would want to like bookmark and refer back to if you ever need to sort of dig up some piece of information about this sordid episode in American history, as I'm sure we someday, future us will thank Kenan for having laid all the facts out. And with that, we must bid you farewell once more. Thank you all very much for listening to the Roundtable. If you want to know more about the stuff we do, there's a bunch of places you can go. I've already mentioned one, that's AmericanMind.org, but you can visit our other Claremont Institute websites at ClaremontReviewOfBooks.com. And you can check out our DC-based Center for the American Way of Life at dc.claremont.org. Finally, if you would like to donate to support us, we would be very grateful, and we would even give you a shout out if you wanted one and not if you didn't. It's at claremont.org/donate that you can do that. You can also mention the Roundtable in your notes if you like, and give us a little pat on the head, because we appreciate that as well. But most of all, we're just grateful for your support, and that includes the fact that you've listened to us today and will continue to, we hope, in the future. If you want to keep listening to us, hit subscribe wherever you are, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Give us 5 stars if you think we deserve it. If you don't think we deserve it, well, that's nice for you, but please keep it to yourself. Only praise, only extravagant praise, if you like, so that we can share that around and help people get to know about the show. Thanks to our production and engineering crew, Jake Gannon, Logan Zeppieri, and Blaze Ebener. And thanks to you all for listening. We will talk to you next week.